kickstart that new idea that you've got.
Microsoft Reactor connects you with the developers and startups that share your goals.
Learn new skills, meet new peers, and discover the latest in technology.
Events are running around the clock, so join us anytime, anywhere.
Reactors are communities to connect. We want you to meet real developers and entrepreneurs just like you. Here you can get skilled up and learn from our product experts in the Microsoft Cloud and in open source. So watch us on demand and share your own perspective as we live stream in communities all around the world.
Hello everyone, good evening to you all. My name is Parth Varu. I am Event Program Manager for Microsoft Reactor Bengaluru. Today we have an exciting session by Shagun and Akshay. But before we start the session, please go through our code of conduct. Sorry, a technical glitch, I guess. Please go through our code of conduct. Before we begin, please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We are all here to learn together. So please be respectful of other people's views, understanding of differences, being kind and considerate in a way you all engage. So we have if you all have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat section. And also, please, we do all encourage you to participate. Over to Shagun and Akshay to begin the session.
So, taking the lead. Hey, hi everyone, I'm Shagun. I am Azure DevOps Support Engineer in Microsoft and having an experience of 1.5 years and speaking from Microsoft Phones, Bengaluru. So, focusing on today's agenda, it's about deploying Azure infrastructure using Azure DevOps. Today, we will be covering two ways to deploy Azure infrastructure. First will be covered by me, that is using Azure CLI, and second will be covered by Akshay, that's using ARM template. Akshay, you want to give a quick introduction about?
Sure, Shagun. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Akshay. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft working on Azure Migrate space. Before this, I was also an Azure DevOps engineer with, I think around 2.5 years of experience in Azure DevOps, enabling customers to use Azure DevOps and integrate with other Azure services. Happy to be here and let's learn together. Shagun, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Akshay. Looking forward to have a great session with you all. So I'll start my session with Azure infrastructure deployment using Azure CLI, and I'll share my screen. And here I go. I think it's taking a bit time. My screen is visible or it's taking time. Yeah, here we are. So giving a quick introduction about Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps, as it states, it eliminates the gap between development and operations. So keeping aside the introduction part, focusing on our today hands-on lab, we will see how we can utilize Azure DevOps tasks for deployment of Azure services or resources. So starting with Azure DevOps, we could see various components like repositories, pipelines, boards, and artifacts. you must be wondering why you can't see the other components of the Azure DevOps. It's because we have this feature where we could enable and disable what we want to see on our interface. So I have disabled the boards and test plans because today we will be focusing on mainly on repositories and pipelines of Azure DevOps. Going back to Microsoft Reactor project, and here we have pipelines. So the pipelines, we have build pipeline, which was mainly responsible for building the code, and the release pipeline. The release pipeline is for the production purposes, which we will be creating to deploy an Azure virtual machine. So as part of our learning today, we will deploy an Azure virtual machine using Azure CLI task. So it will give you a little bit glimpse how we can utilize Azure DevOps to deploy an Azure VM into under our subscription. Starting with our lab, before starting, I will share a link for your reference where it is mentioned about the Azure CLI commands required for the deployment and the creation of Azure VM. We'll start with the release pipeline. I'll click on the new pipeline. We can create a new release pipeline. Here we can select an empty job, and you could see various tasks listed down here, and we can select the task as per our requirement. But right now our requirement is to have an Azure CLI task. I'll start with an empty job and go to one job and 0 tasks. This is the pipeline interface you could see. And here, when I click on agent job, you see the agent pool as hosted Windows 2019. And when I list down, there are many other agents. So talking about agents, like we'll cover the agents later. So agents are basically the machine which will execute your Azure CLI script on your behalf for the deployment and the creation of Azure virtual machine. We'll start by adding the task, and as per our requirement, I'll type Azure CLI and we'll add the Azure CLI task. As easy as it seems, I'll explain the parameters required in this task. The first one is ARM connection. Talking about ARM connection, it is basically used for authentication purposes. Since from Azure DevOps, we are going to deploy Azure virtual machine under our subscription, a resource under our subscription, there is the requirement of an authorization and authentication mechanism. So here we will add an ARM connection, and soon we will create one service connection, and it will give you a glimpse that how to create one and use one. Another is script type. When I click on the drop-down list, we have various type of scripts we can select: PowerShell, PowerShell Core, Batch, and Shell. But for today's agenda, we'll go with Shell. Then the script path, script location. If we select inline script, you can either write your commands here in this box itself, or if you select script path, you could store your file script in the repository section and can use the browse script path to give the location of your paths. These are basically the required parameters which are required for the deployment of an Azure virtual machine. Now going on to the ARM connection part, which we talked about for authentication and authorization purpose. So we will go to I'll duplicate this tab for your easiness, and we have to go to the project settings, and scrolling down, you will see a service connection page. When we click on the service connection, you will see on the top right about new service connection. When we click on the service connection part, there are many types of service connection that we can create. ARM service connection, when we are talking about Docker pull, Docker push, we can use Docker registry service connection, and likewise, there are many other service connections, as Azure DevOps can be integrated with many other Azure services. So as per our requirement, we can select what type of service connection we are interested in. So right now, since it's about Azure virtual machine, we will go ahead with Azure Resource Manager. So I'll select the Azure Resource Manager, and down below, I'll click on Next. So these are basically the 4 methods to create a service connection, either automatic, manual, managed identity, and published profile. In this session, we'll focus on the above 2. So if I click on Service Principal Manual, you will see that it has asked for the subscription ID, subscription name, service principal ID, and service principal key. So service principal ID and service principal key, we will discuss later what kind of values we have to insert here. So initially I'll create a automatic service principal, and when I create an automatic service principal, it will create an app registration under your subscription. So let's create and see how it works, which will give you a clear idea about the authentication and authorization mechanism of Azure Service Connection. So it's loading my subscription, and meanwhile, we can give our service connection a name. I'll go ahead with Reactor India, and I'll go ahead, select my subscription under which I want to have my Azure virtual machine. And this resource group is basically if you want to limit the scope of that service connection. So for right now, we will avoid this. And I'll grant access to permission to all the pipelines for the service connections, that all the pipelines can utilize the service connection for authorization and authentication. And I'll go ahead and save it. It's setting up the connection. So it's basically linking Azure DevOps to my Azure portal, my subscription. So give it a little while, and we'll see how and what it creates in the Azure portal. So meanwhile, our service connection is being initialized and is setting up. We can write a simple script to create our Azure virtual machine. So I'll select an inline script, and I'll start writing my command. First of all, we'll create a resource group, and in resource group, we will create a virtual machine. So writing the Azure CLI command for the same. Azure group create, and under location, I'll select the location where STU is, and the name of the resource group as Reactor India. Going ahead, I'll use my next command to create my VM, Azure VM create. I'll create this VM under my resource group, and I created the resource group as Reactor India. Moving on, I have to provide the name of my virtual machine. I'll name it as, again, Shagun VM. Now, the image of the virtual machine is what we need to mention. I'll use a Windows image, Windows 2022 Azure Edition Core. Moving on, I'll have public IP SKU set as standard. It will assign a public IP, standard public IP to our virtual machines. Now next is about admin username. So the username credentials, the username and password we have to use to log into our virtual machine is must. So I will give it as Azure user, and I'll supply the password. Talking about password, since password is a sensitive credential, I'll talk about the variable section that we can utilize to store our password. So first of all, we'll create a resource group, and secondly, we will create a virtual machine talking about virtual machine in the resource group, name Shagun VM, and image is Windows image, and standard public IP will be assigned to a virtual machine, and username password as the credentials which you will use to log into your virtual machine. So why this dollar password? Since this is a sensitive part, I'll store my variables here in this section. So these are the pipeline variables, a secure section where you could store your passwords or any sensitive information. I'll add, since I have named my variable as password, I'll give it a name password and give it a value. Okay, suppose anything. So it's quite visible to you, but it's fine. So you can lock it. So it will change your variable to secret so that the ones who are using your pipeline are not able to see what kind of password is it. So I'll go back, go to Azure CLI. So the dollar password is my variable. And if you go to variables and again see the password and it's start out, it's not visible anymore. So going back to my Azure CLI and looking to our service connection, it's been a while, and see, my Reactor India service connection is here. Now, what actually is happening behind when you created a service connection? So when I click on Manage Service Principal, you will see it will take me to the Azure portal page. And to my Azure portal, it will open up an app registration. App registration is the one through which you will be authorizing yourself or authenticating. So this is my app registration, which got created when I created that service connection. And I will copy this. And if you see under subscription, when I created that service principal, this app registration got created. And when I selected this subscription, under this subscription, it gave this app registration contributor role. So now this particular service connection has contributor role under my subscription, which give it a rights to create a virtual machine under my subscription. So now talking about the manual part of service principal, which we were discussing earlier. So if you go back, and to new service connection, and again coming to manager, going towards the manual part which we discussed earlier, the subscription ID will be the ID of my subscription, which was subscriptions. So subscription ID, my subscription name. So these are the parameters we will supply here. And the service principal ID will be the client ID of my app registration. And the secret we will be creating through new client secret. So this will be the key. And remember, this is one-time key, key for AzCLI. Name it whatever you like. I'll add it. It's adding a secret and it will display a value. And this value will be displayed just for one time. Make sure to copy it before going to another page, because if you come back, and if I go home and come back to my app registration, go to here. So this is the key we will supply here. And if I go here, again to my managed service principal, under app registrations, it's taking a bit while. And you will see under certificates and secrets that you no longer have access to that key. So it's gone. So be sure to have it saved before going to another tab or on the page. So moving back to our release pipeline, we'll we'll refresh it, and we'll see that it will list our Reactor India service connection. So I'll select that service connection, and I have my inline script. I have selected my agent as Microsoft hosted agent. So this is the Microsoft hosted agent. It's like a Microsoft virtual machine, which have all the dependencies, everything pre-installed in their image. And we will utilize that. And I'll save it, or I'll first edit it and name it as AzCLI for reference. And I'll save it. Okay. And let's see how it goes. I'll create a release. Just before executing it, you will see that it will create a Reactor India resource group, and the name of the virtual machine is Shagun VM. So I'll create my release. I'll create it. Let's see our release 1. Hosted Windows. The job has started. And let's wait for a while and see how it goes or how it proceeds. So our job has initialized. The task is Azure CLI task. So see, it's listing my subscription and my tenant. And oh my God, my script failed. And let's see what's the reason behind that. So, okay. So it states that okay. So I have to create a new resource group in the West US region. Okay. Wait, we will again check a pipeline. So to edit a pipeline, we click on Edit Pipeline and go here. Okay, I see that we have missed this part. Like, okay, my mistake. And I'll add on to it. And then we'll continue. I hope it works. And yeah, we'll save it and try to run it again. I'll create my release. Create it again. So it again started the agent job, and it should probably work now. So difference between answering the questions of Dinesh, difference between pipeline and release. Pipeline is basically for the build purpose. If you want to build your code, you use pipeline, and release is for basically production purpose. If you want to deploy, or since we are deploying here Azure virtual machines, I used release pipeline. So basically this is the main difference. And sometimes you build a code, produce an artifact, and then utilize that artifact to use it to the production environment. So we use the release pipeline at that time. So it seems like our Azure CLI executed successfully. And if we see the result, it finished the Azure CLI. And to check the our resource, we'll go to a subscription and resource group and Reactor India. So to verify, I'll go to my resource group under my Azure portal. And if I select my subscription, here I select Reactor India. And here I see we have deployed our Reactor India successfully. And if I see the resources, the virtual machine is also deployed successfully. And desk, network security group, and the public IP, standard public IP has been already deployed. So all the linked resources to virtual machines have also been deployed. So this is how we can utilize Azure CLI task in Azure DevOps to deploy our Azure virtual machine and Azure infrastructure. This is one of the methods, and the next method using ARM template will be covered by Akshay. And yeah, Akshay, you can go on.
Thank you, Shagun. That was really great. Thank you. Okay, just give me a moment. I'll share my screen. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So Shagun showed you, how to deploy the Azure resources using Azure CLI, right? And now I'm going to show you how to do the same thing using the ARM templates, right? So you can store the ARM templates in your repos, make changes, utilize the proper DevOps methodology like CI/CD, right? And you can make changes, run builds, and all, right? So we'll also be deploying an Azure VM using ARM templates. So what I've done is I've just gone to this particular site, right? It's the Azure Quick Start templates site on GitHub, where you can find a lot of templates like for creating VMs, for creating other things, right? Like VMSs and all those things. So I've gone over to this particular VM simple windows, right? I've taken the Azure deploy.json and the parameters file of that has the ARM template, and I've stored it in my Azure repos, right? You can see it here. What will we be doing now is we'll go to our releases. Since we already have a pipeline, let's create a new release pipeline, right? And we'll create a new pipe. Oh, sorry. Instead of creating a pipeline, just created a release. Okay, we'll just create a new release pipeline. All right, we'll start with an empty job. You can name it whatever you want. Let's say deploy VM. And we have the similar configuration that we had before, right? And let's add, so we have multiple tasks for everything, right? You can, for your .NET Core build, you can use this. For Amazon, you can use this and other stuffs. Now we'll focus on the ARM template thing. Let's go to the ARM template deployment task that we have. Right here we have same things like this is the name, this is changeable, we can name it anything. Like let's deploy a VM. We have the scope as resource group because we'll be creating resources under the resource group. I already have a resource group created here called Reactor ARM template, right? Then we'll be using the ARM resource connection, that will be Reactor India. Now Reactor India service connection was scoped to the entire subscription, as you can see here. So it can access every single resource group and resources inside this particular subscription, right? You can modify it according to your own wish, right? Like if you saw it here, you can even scope it to a resource group. So suppose A is my resource group, and I've created another resource group called B. So it can only access resources within A, not B, right? So if you see here, this is currently scoped to the subscription, but if you select a resource group, it will get scoped to that particular resource group. Let's not fiddle with that. Okay, let's select the subscription, right? Our action is create and update resource group. Let's select the resource group that I've created. Right, I created reactor ARM template. Right, let's select this. Let's select a location. Oops. Okay, now here is the main part. It says linked artifact. Now we haven't linked any artifact yet. We can use the URL of the template directly, or we can use a linked artifact. Since we have the ARM template in our repos, and what we can do is we can go to our pipeline. Here we can have the artifact. So basically an artifact can be utilized as a package. Suppose you have a build code, right? You can use that directly in your release, or we can have Azure Repos, right? We can select our reactor project, and we can select the reactor repo that we have. Let's go with the main branch. It will take the latest, and we can add it. Now, if we'll go over here, what we can do is we can select the linked artifact. Oops, I think it's taking some time. Okay, it's here. So this is the template file. We can select that, and we can select the parameters file, right? Now, you can either write the template parameters here if you want to override the name, the location, and other things, or Azure DevOps gives you an easy way to do that using the 3 dots here. You can just change the username. Let's name it Akshay. So we see that the password was already created by Shagun as a variable. So we'll utilize the same variable, right? This is the DNS label. Like if you have seen in Azure VM, you get an option to name the VM, right? Instead of remembering the IP, you can name it something like akshayvm.westus.cloudapp.com or azure.com, right? So we'll just name it something like Akshay Reactor VM, right? Let's give the public IP name. Let's name it my public IP itself, right? Automatic, we can change it to basic or standard, right? We have this particular OS version. We can select it. Now this is coming from, okay, where is my repo? So this all is coming from the template. If you will see here, right, the allowed values that we have for the OS version. So we can see all these values over there in our release pipeline parameters, right? Let's keep it at 2022 data center. The VM size, let's keep it the same, and let's change the location to, we selected East to West before. Let's do that, and let's name our VM Akshay Reactor, or let's name it Reactor VM, right? And we are done with it. And just one more important thing, you have 3 things here, right? Incremental, complete, and validation only. Make sure you always select incremental, because once you select complete means that, if you have any resource in that resource group, which is not mentioned in the template, it will wipe the entire resource group, right? So complete mode keeps only those resources that are part of your template. Otherwise, it just wipes off the entire data, right? Entire resources in your resource group. So let's make it incremental. So what incremental will do is, if you already have this resource, it will, skip that. But if you don't have this resource, it will just add it to your, current set of resources, right? And validation is just, what will happen, right? What if we do this deployment, right? It will just validate. We can give a deployment name, not necessary, right? Let's go ahead and save this one. And let's create a release. So as you can see, my resource group is empty currently. Let it start. So this particular step is where it's waiting for the agent to get assigned from the pool of, the pool that you have selected. We selected Azure Pipelines, so it's coming from the hosted agent, right? And so it downloaded the artifact. This task is basically where it downloads whatever artifact you have linked over to that particular agent machine. Right, so it downloaded my repo. If you can see here, it says 27 objects to send. This is the one, right? It just checked out my repo and stored over there. Oops, it failed. Okay, I think, okay, now I know. I'm creating a new pipeline altogether, so I cannot use the variable of the other pipeline. Let me use it pretty fast. Let me give it something. All right, I gave it, I can use it within the entire release or within a particular stage, right? So this is my stage. If I add another stage here, right, suppose anything, and if I scope that variable to this particular stage, I cannot use it over here. Right, let's delete it for now. We don't need it. Okay, we have the variable created. Now let's go ahead, save it, and release it. So we can see here, right? This is our artifact. This is the latest version of that commit, right? The commit. We can select any commit, right, and use that as an artifact. Let's go with the latest and create the release. Okay, let's wait for it to complete. And like this, we have shown you, using the classic pipelines. Azure DevOps also gives you an option for, using YAML pipelines, right? So if time allows, we'll show you how to deploy, using Azure CLI, using the YAML pipelines. But, I think let's wait for this to complete. I'll show you how that looks like. Right. So for YAML pipelines, we have to go to the pipeline section, not to the releases. YAML can handle both build and release in one particular, template file. What you can do is create pipeline, and you have to select a repo, that can come from anywhere, right? From any generic Git repository or, the Azure Repos Git. Let's select that. We'll select this particular repo, and we'll have a starter pipeline, right? It already has a script, right? This is how YAML looks like. Right. And apart from that, we can show the assistant. And if we want to add a task, right, we were talking about Azure CLI. We can add the particular service connection. Right. So this is a cool feature that we have, right? We can use the assistant. If you want to write the entire script, if you're familiar with it, you can do that, right? Otherwise, you can just select it from here. We have the inline script, right? Use the script that I think it was this location West US. And let's name it Akshay RG, right? We don't have any arguments. We can add the task, right? This is, how simple it is to use, what do we say, YAML pipelines here. And once you have it, so instead of, going over there for VM image, we can name Windows latest, Ubuntu latest. Let's go with Windows, latest. We can remove these tasks because we don't need this, right? We can just remove this. And this line here, it means, that CI is enabled, right? If we, if we save this pipeline, what will happen is an Azure pipelines.yaml file will be stored in your repos. And that means a change is being made to your repo, right? Next time, whenever a change is made in the repo, it will run this particular pipeline. Right? So this is what trigger main means, right? Any changes to the main branch, it will just trigger this particular pipeline. Right? We can set it to none so that CI is disabled now. Right? You make any changes to the pipeline, to the repos, it won't trigger this thing. Okay. So similarly, we can just save and run this. We're committing directly to the main branch, right? We can even create a pull request and then do it. Let's save it here. And if you'll see here that the pipeline was created, right? It's the same thing that we see over there. It is evaluating your pipeline, right? Okay, so this was the release pipeline that we had. The deploy VM is succeeded now. We'll see here, let's go back to our resource group and you'll see all the resources are here, right? The way we defined them, reactor VM, right? Other things. And if you'll open this, okay. It's still going on in the backend. Let's see. Right, here it is. So this is the DNS name label that we, mentioned. Using this also we can RDP to this machine or using the public IP, right? Let's go back. This is done. So this is what we ran using the YAML pipeline. It's running the same set of tasks. Since this is under the pipelines, we have some other checks here, right? Like credential check and all. So this particular task is running. It got the subscription details. So if you do it via, your terminal and other things, it shows the same set of output, right? And here it is. It says that my resource group called Akshay RG is provisioned. It is succeeded. Let's go back. We can go to the subscription. We can go to the resource groups and you will see here. See, the resource group should be here. What was the name of the resource group? It was Akshay RG. Okay, it's here, right? Akshay RG is here. Right, so this is how we can use the YAML pipelines. We can add the YAML template task as well. It's the same thing, right? It's the same as adding the way we added a CLI task. We can add the YAML template task as well, right? We have it here. We can fill all these details, add it, it will add it here, and then we can use it, right? So this is it. Like this is the demo that we had. If there is a question, you can please ask it in the chat window. And like you saw that, we utilize the agents. We were talking about Microsoft hosted and self-hosted agents, right? So Microsoft hosted agents are the agents that are managed by Microsoft, right? You can use this particular pool, right? You can have any number of parallel jobs, yeah, you need to pay for it, but you get one pool, one pipeline free, right? And in some cases, you'll have to request for it. By default, we don't give the free agent, right? So this is the hosted agent, right? You can run Windows, Linux, and macOS here, macOS agents, right? These are provided by Microsoft. And self-hosted agents are the agents which you manage yourself, right? Like I think I should have an agent here. So this is an agent that, okay, no agent. Yeah, so this is an agent that I manage. Like, I can turn my laptop into a self-hosted agent for Azure DevOps. And but in that case, I'll have to, manage all the softwares, install the softwares, update the softwares, right? In Microsoft hosted agents, everything is done by Microsoft. We update the image, we update, the softwares present in that particular image and all those stuffs, right? So if you want to use your own agent, right, like you are not getting a machine which you need for your, in the, what do we say, Microsoft hosted agents, because we have Ubuntu, Windows 2019, 20, I think not, yeah, 2019 and 2022, and you have macOS. But if you need a latest, some other version of Ubuntu, some other version of Windows, right? You can, create your own self-hosted agent and use that. Also, apart from this, you can also use a VMSS pool, a virtual machine scale set pool, right? You can create your VMSS, select the service connection or the subscription as per your, and once you select it, I'm not sure if there is a VMSS created already. Yeah, it's here, right? We can select the VMSS pool, right? And give an agent pool name, how many, all those things that you'll even find in the VMSS settings, right? How many agents to keep on standby, deleting agents and all those stuff. So this is how you create a pool, right? Similar, it goes for the self-hosted agent. You do that once you create it. Once you create a self-hosted agent, you click on new agent, it gives you a script, something to download, right? Once you do that, you run the config command on your machine, fill all the details that's required, and your agent gets registered over here, right? Like if you see, the Windows 11 agent is here, but probably I think my machine is off, so the agent is off. As soon as my VM comes online, this agent will be online, right? So this is about the agents. I think we have covered it all, right? If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Let me check the comments. Yeah, Arjun, I think so. I should be having this. Just give me a minute. So Arjun has a question. If we have any tutorial pages, let me ping that in the chat window. Like, are there any other questions, Shagun? If you can see that.
No, Akshay, I think Vital has some query regarding YAML and you have addressed it well. And
Okay.
yeah, I think,
Yeah, Vital, like, YAML is the approach, that we'll be taking going forward. But, for the beginners, it's very good to start with Classic so that you get a hang of the Azure DevOps, then you can use YAML. Right, because YAML gives you a lot of features as well that we do not get in the Classic pipelines. Right. Let me ping the link. And okay, there's one more question. Can you show demo for creating pipeline to deploy Azure PostgreSQL using ADO pipeline? I think, Anshu, we can, probably have a session later on, after some days, but I think we are, almost reaching the end of this session. Maybe we can take it later on, right? I think we are good with it. Like, I don't see any more questions in the chat.
yeah.
Okay, I think there's one more question. Please explain the use case for the ARM pipeline. Okay, Arjun, like, see, if you want to, automate the creation of Azure resources, suppose you work for a company that requires, creating and deleting resources, like, creating 1,000 VMs at once, right? Or, you deploy resources very frequently. So instead of going to the portal and, clicking via the UI, you can use the ARM template, make a script of your own, so that it runs in, what do we say? It creates 1,000 VMs for you. You just change the, ARM template, use those in parameters, right? So it's basically for automating your Azure infra deployment. Similarly, it goes for the AzCLI thing, right? But like you can write a script, automate it, right, to deploy a huge number of VMs or any Azure resources, rather than going to the Azure portal and clicking on the UI.
And deploying it one by one. It's easy.
No, the ARM is not the ARM processor, Arjun. It's the Azure Resource Manager, right? So all the resources that you create in Azure, right, even through the UI, those use these ARM templates in the background. Like I can show you. So we created this particular resource group, right? We can go to the export template, right? And you can see, the, what do we say? The ARM template for it. I think this is not a good example. Let me go back to the VM and I'll show you how. Okay. So even if you're using AzCLI, right, it will create your resources and you'll see the template here. So you can export this template, modify it, and then run it again, right? You see here deploy. You can even deploy using Azure portal. So this is the template, right? You can download it, and here is the parameters, right? If I click on deploy here, it will show you the GUI version. Same thing, right? Region name. This has the VMOS and the disk as well now, right? You can just review and create. It will create another VM for you, right? So this is how the ARM templates work, Arjun. So I've just pinged that link in the chat window, right? Any other questions that we
Yeah,
have?
there's a question Sarvesh asked that to integrate Azure Key Vault for password management. Yes, Sarvesh, we can do that. And Akshay, you would like to show
Shall
that?
I? Sure.
Yeah, you
So
can give
Sarvesh,
your.
like, yeah, sorry. So what we can do is, Sarvesh, like we can create a key vault here, right, in our subscription, and then go to the library. This is where we manage, key vault and other variables you can use. This is where we put the certificates, right? And if you want to use key vault, what we can do is, this is the option that we have: link secrets from an Azure key vault as variables. Once you click over here, it will give you the subscription or the service connection, right? Select any, what do we say, key vault, authorize it, because it does not have the permissions. If it's not able to do it, we'll have to go to the Azure portal, give this particular service connection the rights. I think there are no variables as of now. You can create. Okay, so if you see here, these are the, I think these are
Secrets,
the
right?
variables that Shagun has
Yeah.
created, the secrets. You can just click on that, click OK. It will add it to your Azure pipelines, right? Now save it. And this is the name. Let's name it reactor for now. All right, save it. Now what we can do is we can go to our pipelines, edit variables. Here's the section for variable groups. And click on variable groups. This is the thing. Link it. Once you have linked it, you can use the, see, we can use the variable. Now this is the variable that we can use. So this is how we can integrate Azure Key Vault, instead of using the in-house variables section. I hope this answers your question, Sarvesh.
Hey, do we all have any more questions coming in?
I think there are no more questions. This was the last
Okay.
one.
So before we call for a wrap, I would like to share few links, which are our Reactor LinkedIn and our Reactor Meetup page link. So I'm sharing those links in the chat section. Yes. So the first one is our Reactor LinkedIn group link. Do join us on our Microsoft Reactor LinkedIn group, and do check out our future section, all future events in our Reactor Meetup page. So Shagun and Akshay, let's call for a wrap.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you
so much.
everyone for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank you so
everyone for
much
joining us.
for being here, and it was a great session with you all. Thank you so much.